Well, good morning to you all. I'll open really sort of like John Stewart has, that when he remarked that the presidency is supposed to age the president, not the nation. And I feel like that's where we are right now. The immigration issue is obviously a very raw issue for our community. Our community is a county of immigrants, 170 different cultures in Montgomery County. So when the president comes out with executive orders that roil our community, that threaten to split our community, it is incumbent upon our county to stand up and speak out. And we have done so, and you have copies of the statement that the county executive and all of my colleagues and I issued last week. It will continue to be a significant issue, and we will continue to abide by our values. We do this the right way in Montgomery County. There is no federal law, nor could there be a federal law, that requires local police to inquire with respect to immigration status. They cannot do that under the Constitution, and we do not do that. So we do not withhold information with respect to such matters. To the extent to which we detain somebody where there is a warrant for their arrest, or we have probable cause that there has been a crime committed, we then cooperate with federal officials, including ICE. To me, that strikes the right balance. We protect our community in every way. We ensure that our community feels safe, feels welcome, feels respected, and we do what we must do when there are people that have done things that no one would countenance. So this is a big issue. I spoke to our state delegation on Friday with respect to it, and certain questions were raised by members of the delegation. And so what I have done with our good people that help us at Annapolis is arrange for our police chief, our corrections chief, and for our county attorney to join me this Friday before the delegation and make sure that every member of our state delegation understands exactly what is the Montgomery County way. So that's real important. With respect to the executive order regarding the ban from certain countries in which there are Muslim majorities, let me make the following observations. We are a nation of laws. Our founding fathers wisely created 3 co-equal branches of government. The notion that we have, well, let me say it this way. It is a hallmark of authoritarian impulses to debunk the judiciary and to call a federal judge a, quote, so-called federal judge is an affront to the judiciary and to our Constitution. I have had the privilege of practicing before federal judges, including the Ninth Circuit and the United States Supreme Court, as a lawyer. I have disagreed with federal judges. This particular federal judge was appointed by George W. Bush and unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate. Unanimously. It is not okay to call federal judges so-called federal judges, as it would not be okay to call our president a so-called president. So it really is so offensive to those of us that really are hoping that the rule of law will prevail. The Ninth Circuit has obviously felt, as federal judges across the country have felt, that this order is probably unconstitutional and unlawful. We will see how this plays out. It undoubtedly will play out before the United States Supreme Court. But this is a matter that Montgomery County cares about because we have a very large Muslim community here. A community that has been a wonderful part of Montgomery County, that does great work. So it is something that I feel strongly about and that I know many people feel strongly about. And I do look forward to having press conferences with you. Then we do not lead with these sets of issues, but they are top of mind for so many of us and so many of our residents, or I wouldn't be raising it. We will have, as you know, next week a panel that discusses how we in Montgomery County deal with hate crimes and extremism, and we really do such a fabulous job of that. And so it was to showcase how we do things differently in Montgomery County and how we do it the right way that I thought it important to bring this panel together, because some of the work that has been done, led by our Muslim community, is now the model for the world. And so we have reason to be proud of the work we do in Montgomery County. Let me turn to second issue for the morning. That is the Bethesda plan, which comes before the Fed committee this afternoon, in which the major issue that we will be discussing is our school capacity. It's an issue that I care deeply about and have cared deeply about. 2 years ago, I held a forum at BCC High School on this very issue, infrastructure and growth. Are we keeping pace? It is fundamental to keeping the confidence of our community that we make sure that as we make conscious decisions to grow in certain parts of our community, that we have the school capacity there. What makes this awkward, of course, is that we don't control that entirely. We have an elected school board, and we have a context in which there are 3,000 new kids a year pouring into our schools, so that this is a county-wide problem. And it is why I've asked our school system to develop a county-wide approach, a master plan, if you will, of school capacity. And I am hoping that we will get that from the school system in the not-too-distant future. Obviously, it goes beyond Bethesda, beyond my district. It is a problem across the county. But I do feel that we bear a special responsibility to address this issue when we make conscious decisions that we are going to grow in a particular part of our county in which school capacity is, in fact, an issue. I think the elementary school situation is basically doable, and the middle school situation is basically doable. The high school situation is going to be tough. BCC is sitting on the smallest plot of land of any high school in our county, and its capacity to grow is limited. So we are going to have to work real hard with our school system to come up with answers. It's part of the reason why I am going to be supporting staging in the Bethesda plan, because we really do need to make sure that this 20 to 30 year plan, that we are in a position to put a stop button on or a pause button on if in fact we are not taking care of our infrastructure needs. School capacity is so terribly important. Ask any mother or father when they've got a third grader and they go, well, I'm glad you're going to address this 10 years from now, but actually my child is in school right now. What are you going to do there? Now, part of the problem, of course, is that these plans are 10, 20, 30-year plans. And so when you project numbers, those numbers feel to the community that they're going to arrive on day one. And that's obviously not the case. But it doesn't mean you aren't planning for it, and that we need to work so closely with our school system, respecting their needs, but also making sure that they understand that when we say Bethesda should grow some, that they are in a position to accommodate that growth. Many people say, well, why are we growing at Bethesda at all? Well, the reality is every independent analysis has said that our county will grow significantly over the next 20 years. So this isn't about whether we will grow. This is about managing that growth, about saying, where do we think it best that we grow? And obviously those of us that believe in smart growth, that believe that we want to have more growth around our transit areas as opposed to perpetuating sprawl, that makes the most sense. And I'm one of those that raise my hand and saying, this is where it makes the most sense. And school system, you need to help us get there. So I am hoping that that will in fact happen. We have been very much on top of this in our council actions preceding the Bethesda plan. We now have taxes for development that went from 90% of the cost of a child to 120% of a cost of adding a child to a school. We have increased recordation taxes. We have made sure that the current moratorium that existed cluster-wide is now applicable at an individual school site. So my colleagues and I have been very attentive to this set of issues, and now we need our school system to help us on this one. I will be asking a lot of questions this afternoon with respect to that set of issues. Let me turn to minimum wage for a moment and talk about Derek Davis, Delegate Derek Davis, Chairman Derek Davis's bill that would preempt local governments across the state from dealing with minimum wage or other benefits like sick and safe leave. We will oppose that legislation very strongly. There's a letter that will be circulated to my colleagues today that's been drafted by our Annapolis folks, and that I will testify tomorrow. The state should not preempt Montgomery County and other local jurisdictions from attending to their people, attending to the local circumstances that exist. We know the local circumstances here. We know, for example, that it is a higher cost jurisdiction than the rest of the state. Therefore, we need to do things differently. Now, my colleagues and I and the county executive may not always see eye to eye on every aspect of it, but we do see eye to eye on this. We are unanimous in believing that our county should have the right and the responsibility for addressing our residents' needs. Let me share with you a Metro matter. I will be sending with a number of my colleagues today a letter to Jack Evans, who's chairman of WMATA, urging them to the maximum extent possible not to balance their budget with fare increases and service reductions. We believe that there is a very non-painful way in which half of the proposed budget that is at issue here, $50 million, can be addressed without any trouble whatsoever, because there was literally a double accounting at WMATA. They put $23 million for spare parts in both the operating budget and the capital budget because the staff didn't know which bucket to put it in. So literally you can take out $23 million of that $50 million and make sure that particularly our bus riders don't have a fare increase, that we don't have the turn back at Grosvenor that would be so disruptive for our community, that we could reduce the number of bus lines that would be eliminated. And then you have other opportunities that may present themselves with respect to preventive maintenance dollars and capital dollars that have been used in the past. My posture with respect to that is you should not be robbing Peter to pay Paul, but if you can do it and you think you can do it without sacrificing reliability and safety, then you ought to take a look at that seriously. But as I think all of you know, I've been one that say there are times when we have to make sacrifices, and if the board ultimately concludes that there is some small measure of sacrifice that is going to be required by those who use Metro, then that's just what has to happen. There was a major piece in the local paper today with respect to Mr. Wiedenfeld and his tenure as head of WMATA, and I just want to say that from my perspective, we are so fortunate to have Paul Wiedenfeld leading this organization, and the notion that somehow he would be able to turn around this organization in a year, to me, is simply one that all of us have to appreciate is just totally unrealistic. This is an extraordinarily complex organization. It's much like asking Jack Smith, who's now the superintendent of MCPS, to suddenly eliminate the achievement gap. Okay? This is hard work that we will have to do together, but no one could come into that organization and do better, in my judgment, than Paul Wiedenfeld has done. Finally, let me just express my appreciation for our county moving forward with a public-private partnership on microgrids. What are microgrids? Basically, they are creating their own little utility system, separate and apart from Pepco. And that's something we need to do, because the reliability of Pepco over the years has not been terrific, and obviously we can do better on our own and take care of facilities like our public safety facilities that have to have power 24/7, and we can make that happen with a microgrid. We'll use solar and natural gas. We will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's a net plus, and that was something that was announced in the middle of last week, and something that I had been very much in the forefront of and pushing, and so pleased to see it happen. I will pause, ladies and gentlemen. Why don't I open it up to you guys? Let's see what's on your mind.
When you said Paul Wiedefeld has turned around Metro in 1 year.
No, I didn't say that.
He wasn't able to, but okay. What did you say with regard to how he has done so far?
I think he's done superbly.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has done superbly. I don't think you could ask for anything more from a leader of this organization than what you've gotten from Paul Wiedenfeld.
Could you mention any examples of things that perhaps your constituents have told you they're happy with?
Well, I promise you my constituents just want Metro to work every day, and then when it doesn't work, we hear from our constituents. We often don't hear from our constituents praising people's making tough decisions, but Paul Wiedenfeld, time and time again, has made tough decisions. He's made tough decisions to close the system down. He made tough decisions to let people go. He's brought in good leadership. He has had a minefield to deal with in terms of the board. He has done everything you want a general manager to do and more. So we just need to understand that some things do take time. And when you allow a system of this nature to have degraded to the extent to which it did, you are going to have, it's going to take time to dig out of the hole. But this is one of those situations when you're in a hole, and there's that wonderful saying, when you're in a hole, stop digging. We were in a hole and we stopped digging. He is going to make this system better.
If I could go back to, you mentioned the 23 million was counted twice and some could be taken out. What's your source of information for that?
Speaking with members of the board.
Fairly regular accounting practice, right? Just as you go along, you figure out where stuff will be allotted, or...
Yeah, and this one the staff really didn't know. Does it go here? Does it go there? So it had the effect of double counting.
But that's the number everybody's working with.
Right. So that's what, but yes, but that's why in this situation we have a pretty non-painful solution.
So now it's like finding 23 mil.
Yes.
It's a gift.
It's a gift.
Couple of transit center questions.
Yes.
Anything you can share with us about the executive session coming up in a few minutes? Are you just being updated on the progress of litigation, or is there something else?
Mr. Turk, you're a sophisticated reporter. What part of closed session are you unfamiliar with?
I don't, closed is not, I don't know what that means.
What it means is I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Well, can you talk about the item that's on the agenda tomorrow on, it's a funding item for the transit center, and in parentheses underneath it says recordation tax premium. I didn't, it's $4.2 million.
Yes.
Could you talk about that? I don't know what that's about.
My understanding as to what that's about is that it is to pay our lawyers in this litigation.
Is that what the recordation tax was? I don't think that's what folks had in mind when it was passed, was it?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. It's a fair question. I don't know.
Because you just talked about it being funded, using to fund school capacity, but it's going to the lawyers for the transit center instead.
I will check into that. So what I do know is that we have been assured by our county executive time and time again that the cost of this litigation will not ultimately be borne by our taxpayers. That we expect those dollars to be recouped in the course of the litigation. That is what I can tell you.
And there's no nexus between this executive session coming up and the spending measure that's on the agenda tomorrow. Can you tell me that?
Mr. Turk. I admire your doggedness in this regard, but honest to goodness, I cannot begin to talk about things that are in closed session. Okay.
In regards to the minimum wage bill, has the county taken any steps forward to make any changes since Executive Leggett's veto?
There are, again, our expectation is that we will get to yes. We will pass a minimum wage law this year. Okay? I understand that Baltimore is now considering going forward with a minimum wage law. You will note in that law that it exempts businesses, small businesses, either completely or only has, I believe, a 60-cent per year increase. Okay? So the county executive had said in his veto message he is looking for exemptions of small businesses. So this debate has primarily been about that fundamental issue, about finding the right balance between moving forward and taking care of people who do need to be able to earn more dollars. No question about it. But it is also true that many of us felt, and the small business community certainly felt, that the minimum wage law would impose an incredible burden on them that would result in them laying people off, reducing benefits, and in some instances losing their business. So the goal all along has been to find a better balance that works for Montgomery County, that reconciles these two competing truths. And I remain confident that we will get there. The county executive has indicated that he wants to have an independent study done by July. So that gives us plenty of time in the fall, more than a half a year before our current minimum wage law ends, to get this right. So we will come back and we will pass a minimum wage law this year.
When it comes to immigration, for years the county has been working towards getting the immigrant community closer to the police department.
Yes.
And lately you have stated clearly your position. But do you think that the whole situation has affected that relationship with the...
We are fearful that it does. We are fearful that our immigrant community will be more reluctant to come forward when they need to. More reluctant to come forward to take advantage of the benefits that may be available to them, for fear that they will now be targeted. We have heard that from some of our county department leaders, their fears with respect to that. So this whole conversation has created a great deal of anxiety in our community, and that's why we are going out of our way to try and minimize the damage that is being done.
This resource recovery facility, you talked last week about maybe getting rid of the middleman, the Northeast Waste Disposal Authority. Has the council talked about that? Is there conversations about getting rid of this middle party, third party?
Yes. So we have not had that discussion yet, other than what took place at the committee session, waiting to see the county executive position with respect to that. Our chief administrative officer gave voice to that himself. And in my conversations, he reiterated those concerns. Would we be better off having direct relationship with Covanta, which, as I know many of you know, had another unfortunate fire in Fairfax just a few days ago. So we would like to be assured that this existing relationship does not get in our way of getting the performance that is required.
The council was briefed on the past issues at this facility last week. Was the T&E committee or the council briefed, or were you privy to any of these issues before the fire happened?
I had been briefed with respect to those issues earlier in the year with respect to the concerns at the boilers in particular were not maintained at the level that they should have been, and that the efforts underway to in fact make that happen. And that we were given assurances that Covanta, who I think testified to the same, recognized that they dropped the ball and doubled down on their commitment to invest in this facility and make sure that it was in fact running as it should. So I had been briefed with respect to that and had no sense that more was necessary or we would have done more.
So your sense that Covanta had this issue, this was not like a major safety issue at the plant that?
That's right.
Okay.
There was no correlation in any of those conversations between the failure to do proper maintenance and the fire that subsequently took place.
What do you think is the future of this plant? Do you think that, an incinerator in Dickinson is the way to go for trash in Montgomery County?
So there's that ongoing debate. Our Department of Environmental Protection and others do believe that the incinerator with the most modern scrubbing equipment that makes sure that the emissions are well within range, plus burning that trash and selling it for energy, is environmentally preferable to the alternatives. Now, there are those that believe that there could be new alternatives emerging, particularly if we get composting and other things underway, which I've led the effort on composting. I don't know if that's realistic as to whether or not we would not need an incinerator or landfill, but landfill methane is really damaging to the environment. So when I, in this moment, compare the alternatives, I continue to believe that this facility will probably serve our community well into the future. It has a useful life somewhere around 40 years. We're midway through it. There are those that argue that that useful life has been degraded by the lack of ongoing maintenance, and that certainly could be the case. But these are facilities that in many parts of the world run 40, 50 years. So until there is a credible suggestion of how we could dispose of our waste in a healthier, more environmentally sustainable way, my presumption is that this facility will continue.
Regarding cultural diversity in the county, people love examples. You said that members of the Muslim community have done initiatives that lead the world. What are you talking about?
Well, the organization that we will be hearing from next week, WORD, W-O-R-D-E, led by Muslim community, has really developed a program that has been embraced by the FBI, that has been, people have been asked them to come around the world and explain how they do this work of making sure that an individual that might be susceptible to extremism is brought in as opposed to isolated. So I don't want to steal their thunder. I urge you to come and listen to it because it is very impressive, this work.
Just to try to keep people from developing the inclinations to be terrorists?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah, I didn't have any context whatsoever. I just didn't know what you were talking about.
yes. Violent extremism. Okay? And they are doing just terrific work in that regard.
Speaking of expected lifetime of facilities, Blair High School is going to be replacing its turf field, even though it's not the oldest field in Montgomery County, given the fact that Montgomery County has helped fund some of the turf fields. Do you have any comments?
I don't.
It's expired prematurely prior to its warranty.
I have no
Okay.
comments.
All right, thank you.
How's the state looking on this minimum wage thing? Are they gonna pass that? How's it looking?
I don't believe so. At the end of the day, I don't believe that the state will, in fact, preempt Montgomery County or Baltimore County, Prince George's County, from taking care of our residents the way in which we feel is best.
Any thoughts on Governor Hogan's State of the State address last week?
No,
Did you watch it?
no.
Why not?
It is all I can do. Take care of the business before me. I don't mean to denigrate the significance of the governor. but I've never watched a state address by a governor in my 12 years on the council.
Did you read his address?
I read portions of it.
If I could go back to, speaking of constituents, go back to Metro, you had said if you would appreciate it if the cost deficit is not put on the backs of riders, so to speak, by a fare increase. Such practice is commonplace for Metro general managers, at least with every other year. Would you be okay with any fare increase?
Well, again, as I said, if ultimately they conclude that a fare increase is warranted, first of all, my hope would be that it would not be on bus riders. To the extent to which there needs to be a modest increase in order to close a budget gap for our rail riders, that if that must be, it must be. Our fundamental concern is that at a time of dissatisfaction with the quality of service, to curtail service and raise fares invites a death spiral, and none of us want to see a death spiral. So it is not something you would normally encourage an organization to do, is to increase your prices when people are unhappy with the current service. So it's only as a last resort would you consider doing that, and that is certainly my hope in this instance, that if they conclude they must, because it would be irresponsible to do otherwise, or they have no other pot of dollars, then they must. But it is certainly not something that would be your option of first resort.
Why try to keep it away from bus riders?
Because I think it's generally true that bus riders are less economically advantaged than rail riders. Therefore, an increase for bus riders has a disproportionate impact.
Okay. Any other possibilities as to where they could find funding? Because it sounds like you have hope that there's other possibilities.
There are other federal funds that have been given to WMATA that I speak to in the letter that again involve some capital expenditures that may in fact need to be made. And so there are those that have said we don't need to use those. Not prepared to make such a statement because I do believe that in the past we have diverted dollars that we need for the health of the system. We can't keep going down that track.
This statement, you gave this to us last week, you're giving it to us this week. Do you have some concern that you're not reaching the residents who you want this message to resonate with? And what kind of outreach is the county doing to reach people who are not English speakers?
Well, we're doing a lot of outreach. In fact, we have a meeting on Wednesday with many of the community partners that we work with in order to have just that kind of dialogue. What more can we do? What more help do you need in order to reach out to the communities and let them know that they are safe, respected, honored here in Montgomery County? So we're having that dialogue today, ongoing, every day.
Are you getting reports from the service centers? Are they hearing from residents directly? How does that interaction work?
Well, primarily it runs through the service centers, but also directly to our department heads who are hearing this, of course, directly. And so we met last week with our department heads around this very table to understand what they're hearing. And that was where one of the department heads expressed the concern that members of the community who are otherwise eligible for certain benefits, federal benefits, are not taking advantage of them, for fearful that if they do so, they will then be targeted and more vulnerable to being deported. So when that happens, then now you're talking about people going hungry because of fear that has been created by the President of the United States. And so this is...
I'm sorry,
Any reports from the schools? Have they seen any increased absenteeism?
The school system was present. Jack Smith was at this meeting, in which he was very forceful in expressing his concern with respect to what this meant for his kids.
Is this anecdotal, or is there any actual data about people holding back from seeking benefits, or absentee
you.
I think at this moment it's anecdotal, just because it's still too new and too raw. But it was enough certainly to get my attention and the attention of my colleagues that this is a serious concern. You already had, as was reported, nervousness of what's the relationship between immigrant communities and our police and our government. Many people come to the United States with an immigrant experience in which their relationship with their government was not exactly wonderful. So they are naturally predisposed to keep their head down. And now we're fearful they're going underground in a way that will cause harm to them. So.
Roger, we're gonna have to, we have another meeting for you.
We do. We
Yeah,
have
yeah,
a closed session.
the
Secret meeting.
The secret meeting coming up.
If anybody has anything else for Roger, I'll try and set you up for later, but I know he has to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, sir.